Let's look at leadership now. And South Africa's leaders must go back to basics. That's one of the lessons from a survey by research firm Ipsos. Now, the poll asked people how leaders should behave during the COVID crisis. Seems there's lots of concern about bread and butter issues. Let's get the details. Reporter Michael Marillier tracking the numbers. So, Mike, the poll asked people about the characteristics of leaders. So what exactly do we want from our politicians?
Yeah, for a start, we don't want them to steal our money, right, Sally? But this poll spans 28 countries across the world, emerging markets as well as the so-called developed countries, asking what we see when we think of a leader who can take us out of the COVID crisis. What are the key characteristics that these leaders must have? Some very interesting answers, Sally, from across the spectrum, really, of the various countries. And very interesting to see the difference between the global averages and South Africa itself. So let's focus, first of all, on the number one characteristic that people want to see, and that is putting the country before politics. This was across the range of countries, Sally, but take a look first of all at the global average. 33% of people saying put the country before politics. That's what we want to see from our leaders. In South Africa, much, much higher. In fact, 18 percentage points. 51% of us saying that the country must come first. I asked an Ipsos researcher, Sally, why is there such a big difference when it comes to the global average and South Africa? She said that this could be a reflection of the last few years, Sally, the political turmoil that we have had in this country, allegations of state capture and so on. So perhaps it's not a reflection just of the current leadership. It could also be a reflection of previous governments and the controversies that we faced during those times. Now let's focus on the second most important characteristic, and that was being honest with the public. So straight talk from our leaders. Again, a big difference between the South African number and the global average. The global average, Sally, 29%. South Africa, 10 percentage points higher at nearly 40%. So clearly, you mentioned bread and butter issues. We want politicians to be honest with us, and we want them really to put the service in public service.
The fact that we're 10 percentage points higher than the global average in wanting honesty, does that mean that we feel the lack of it more than those other countries?
Yeah, absolutely. So there is that appetite for that particular characteristic, and the experts saying that that suggests that that may have been a problem in the past. And that explains why we've expressed that desire for honesty much more than the other countries in the survey.
Okay, that's really interesting. Now, there's obviously a lot of debate around the economic impact of the lockdown. The poll suggesting that debate is far from over.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the other characteristics that came to the fore for the South Africans, Sally, was the balance between the economy and health. They want leaders who take those sorts of things into consideration. Let's focus very quickly on that, Sally, and we'll look at this economy-health balance. South Africans, again, saying that it's crucial that their leaders consider the economic impact of lockdown and restrictions. Around the world, 25% said this was an issue. In South Africa, again, it was 38% or nearly 40%. So this is something really I think that the country is going to have to consider, the leaders are going to have to consider as we try and navigate our way out of the crisis, Sally. So trust a big issue. Trust really is a big issue. And we've seen in other surveys that often acceptance of the vaccine, the willingness to take the vaccine, is associated with support for the government. So if the government can get people on board, perhaps we'll see more people taking the vaccine.
It's interesting, again, that South African average is quite a lot higher than the global average. Does that suggest, again, that the sense is the balance around prioritising, fixing our economy has not been achieved, possibly because we're in such an economic difficult time?
Yeah, absolutely. So once again, an expression of what people really are desperate to see in terms of the government's response to the COVID-19 crisis. So it's really a cry for help, if you like, coming out of this survey to say, please consider the needs of the ordinary person and don't just focus on policy. let's really deal with those bread and butter issues.
It's interesting what you say about trust and the need for honesty and trust, because in many ways our government has been lauded across the world for being very open about what was going on with the lockdown, about what was going on with the virus. We've had scientists at the podium telling us what's what. We've had our health minister being very open about what they did and didn't know. And if you compare that to the time when certainly Donald Trump was at the helm in the USA, a vast difference there.
Yeah, absolutely. And interesting, Sally, we said that putting the country first was an important characteristic. 51% of South Africans saying that's absolutely crucial. We looked at the American figures as well. 46% of them saying that's the most important characteristic in terms of dealing with the COVID crisis. Was that the hangover from the Donald Trump era? Quite possibly. And that perhaps also gives us some clues about how South Africans are feeling. It's not just the Ramaphosa era. There was also the Zuma era where a lot of these problems came to the fore.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Michael Marillier. Fascinating information there.